you ever noticed that your body can be exhausted, your eyes heavy, and yet your mind refuses to stop? You lie down at night, ready to sleep, but suddenly a conversation from earlier returns. A mistake you made years ago appears out of nowhere. A worry about tomorrow begins to grow. One thought leads to another, and before you know it, your mind is running in circles. Most people believe they are tired because life is difficult. But if you look closely, much of your suffering does not come from what happened. It comes from what your mind continues to do long after the event is over. A single comment can stay in your head for days. A small mistake can be replayed hundreds of times. A problem that has not even happened yet can steal an entire night of sleep. More than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha recognized this deeply human struggle. He saw that people do not suffer only because of circumstances. They suffer because the mind clings to those circumstances, analyzes them endlessly, resists them, or tries to control them. The strange thing is that when we feel overwhelmed, we often try to solve the problem by thinking even more. We search for more answers. We try harder to understand everything. We convince ourselves that if we can just figure everything out, we will finally find peace. But that approach is like trying to extinguish a fire with more fire. The more you force your mind to become quiet, the louder it seems to get. The harder you try to stop thinking, the more thoughts appear. Eventually, you become exhausted from fighting your own mind. Tonight, through a series of ancient Buddhist stories, you will discover a different possibility. Peace does not come from controlling every thought. Peace comes when you stop fighting them. Sometimes the mind does not need another answer. Sometimes it simply needs permission to rest. And perhaps, for the first time in a very long while, you can allow yourself to do exactly that. For centuries, people have misunderstood the phrase, no mind. Some hear it and imagine a blank mind with no thoughts at all. Others think it means becoming emotionless, detached from life, or somehow shutting down the natural activity of the brain. But that is not what the Buddhist masters meant. No mind does not mean having no thoughts. It means no longer being trapped by them. Thoughts may still arise, memories may still appear, plans, worries, and ideas may continue to move through awareness, just as clouds move across the sky. The difference is that you stop chasing every cloud. You stop building a home inside every passing thought. Imagine sitting beside a river. Leaves float by on the surface of the water. Some are large, some small, some move quickly, while others drift slowly downstream. Most people jump into the river after every leaf. A thought appears, and they follow it. A memory appears, and they relive it. A fear appears, and they begin arguing with it. Soon they are exhausted, not because of the river itself, but because they never stop jumping in. The state of no mind is different. You remain on the shore. You see the leaves. You notice them, but you do not chase them. This is why the ancient Zen masters often seemed so calm. It was not because their minds were empty. It was because they were no longer fighting with every thought that appeared. When a worry came, they noticed it. When a memory came, they noticed it. When a feeling of sadness came, they noticed that too. Then they allowed it to pass. Simple, natural, effortless. Tonight, as you listen to these stories, there is no need to force your mind to become quiet. In fact, trying to force silence often creates even more noise. Instead, let the thoughts come. Let them stay if they wish. Let them leave when they are ready. You do not need to control the river. You only need to stop jumping into it. And as you begin to understand this simple truth, something remarkable starts to happen. The mind gradually discovers a peace that effort could never create. In the mountains of ancient China stood a monastery famous for its scholars. Monks traveled from distant regions to study there. The halls were filled with discussions about Buddhist philosophy, meditation, emptiness, enlightenment, and the deepest mysteries of the mind. The smartest students were admired. The ones who could memorize long scriptures gained respect. The ones who could explain difficult teachings were praised by everyone. Among them lived a young monk named Hui. Unlike the others, Hui struggled with even the simplest lessons. Whenever the master explained a teaching, the other monks nodded in understanding. They asked intelligent questions and offered thoughtful answers. But Hui sat quietly in confusion. No matter how hard he tried, he simply could not understand. When the monks memorized sacred texts, Hui forgot the words. When they debated Buddhist teachings, Hui had nothing to say. Many people secretly believed he was not suited for monastic life at all. Some even suggested that he return home and live an ordinary life. But the abbot saw something different. He noticed Hui's sincerity. The young monk never complained. He never gave up. Every day he continued showing up with a humble heart, even when understanding seemed impossible. One morning, after another failed lesson, the abbot called him aside. "Hui," he said gently, "I have a different practice for you." The young monk felt a spark of hope. Perhaps now, he would finally learn the secret teachings everyone else understood. But the abbot simply handed him a broom. Every morning at dawn, sweep the courtyard. That was all. No scriptures, no philosophy, no meditation techniques, just sweeping. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months became years. While other monks studied profound teachings, Hui swept the stones. While they debated enlightenment, Hui swept away fallen leaves. While they pursued wisdom through words, Hui pursued nothing at all. Year after year, he continued. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Then something extraordinary happened. The mind that had struggled to understand everything finally stopped trying. There was no longer a monk seeking enlightenment. No longer a monk comparing himself to others. No longer a monk worried about success or failure. There was only sweeping. The sound of the broom, the cool morning air, the movement of the body, the simple reality of this moment. One day, the abbot asked him a famous Zen question that had challenged scholars for centuries. Instead of answering with clever words, Hui simply lifted his broom and smiled. The abbot immediately understood. After 40 years of simplicity, Hui had discovered something that many scholars never found. Peace does not come from collecting more ideas. Peace comes when the mind stops chasing them. And perhaps many of us are living like those scholars today, always searching, always analyzing, always trying to figure everything out, yet still feeling exhausted. So before we continue, take a moment and ask yourself honestly, how often do you make life more complicated than it needs to be? If this story speaks to you, type 1 in the comments below. Let it be a small reminder that maybe you don't need another answer tonight. Maybe you simply need a little more presence. Most people hear this story and immediately focus on the number, 40 years. 40 years of doing the same thing every day. 40 years of sweeping the same courtyard. To many people, that sounds boring. It sounds like a wasted life. Surely a person could learn more by studying books, attending lectures, or searching for new experiences. But the real lesson is hidden beneath the surface. The courtyard was never the true practice. The broom was never the true practice. The leaves were never the true practice. The practice was learning how to stop fighting the present moment. Every day, Hui faced the same task. Nothing exciting happened. There was no promotion, no reward, no applause, no proof that he was making progress. Yet he continued. Gradually, something began to dissolve inside him. The constant need to become someone. The constant desire to achieve something. The endless pressure to prove his worth. Most people spend their lives chasing the next thing. When they are young, they chase success. When they find success, they chase recognition. When they gain recognition, they chase security. When they find security, they chase something else. The destination keeps moving. The finish line keeps shifting. And the mind never rests. Hui's sweeping interrupted that cycle. There was nowhere to go. Nothing to achieve. Nothing to become. Only this sweep. Then, the next sweep. Then another. Slowly, his attention returned to simple reality. He felt the cool air of dawn against his skin. He noticed the sound of the broom moving across stone. He watched sunlight spread across the courtyard each morning. Things that most people ignore became enough. And that is what makes this story so powerful. The modern mind is constantly searching for something extraordinary. A breakthrough. A secret method. A life-changing insight. Yet peace is often hiding inside the ordinary moments we overlook every day. The warmth of a cup of tea. The sound of rain against a window. A quiet breath. The feeling of your body resting in a chair. These moments are always available. But a busy mind rushes past them, convinced that happiness must be somewhere else. Hui discovered the opposite. The moment he stopped running after life, he finally began to experience it. And perhaps that is why his simple smile carried more wisdom than thousands of pages of philosophy. Because after 40 years of sweeping, he no longer needed to understand peace. He had become familiar with it. The hidden trap of the thinking mind. As the years passed, the other monks continued to study harder and harder. They discussed enlightenment late into the night. They analyzed every teaching. They debated the meaning of emptiness, awareness, and liberation. Many of them became highly knowledgeable. They could explain profound Buddhist concepts with remarkable precision. Yet something curious happened. The more knowledge they accumulated, the more their minds seemed occupied. Each answer created new questions. Each insight opened another puzzle to solve. The search never truly ended. Meanwhile, Hui continued sweeping. No theories, no arguments, no intellectual battles, just the simple movement of a broom across stone. One morning, as he swept the courtyard, he noticed something he had never seen before. The mind was completely quiet. Not because he had forced it to be quiet, not because he had conquered his thoughts, but because there was nothing left to fight. The breeze moved through the trees. Birds sang in the distance. The broom brushed against the ground. Everything happened naturally. And for the first time, there was no voice inside asking for more. No voice comparing. No voice judging. No voice trying to become enlightened. Only this moment. Many people believe peace arrives when all problems are solved. But Hui discovered something different. Peace appears when the mind stops turning every moment into a problem that needs solving. The greatest burden is often not life itself. It is the endless mental commentary about life, the constant analyzing, the constant worrying, the constant need to understand everything before allowing ourselves to rest. When that habit loosens, even for a moment, a quiet space begins to appear. And within that space, there is a kind of freedom that cannot be learned from books. It can only be experienced directly. The centipede, who forgot how to walk. There once lived a centipede who moved through the forest with effortless grace. She crossed rocks, roots, fallen branches, and uneven ground without hesitation. Her 100 legs worked together in perfect harmony. She never stumbled. She never became confused. She simply walked. One sunny morning, a curious toad watched her passing by. The toad was fascinated. "I've always wondered something," he called out. The centipede stopped politely. "How do you manage all those legs?" The toad shook his head in amazement. "I only have 4, and sometimes even that feels complicated. But you have 100. Which leg moves first? How do you know which one follows? How do you keep them all organized?" The centipede froze. No one had ever asked her that before. For the first time in her life, she looked down at her many legs and began thinking about them. Which one does move first? The front right? The front left? Maybe the second one behind it? Or perhaps several, move together. She tried to figure it out. She concentrated harder. She analyzed every possible sequence. Then she attempted to take a step and stumbled. She tried again, this time even worse. Her legs tangled together in confusion. The more she thought about walking, the less she could walk. What had once been completely natural suddenly became impossible. The story sounds amusing, but it reveals something profound about the human mind. Many of us live exactly like that centipede. We overthink conversations until we no longer speak naturally. We analyze relationships until we no longer enjoy them. We worry about sleep until we can no longer sleep. We try so hard to relax that relaxation becomes impossible. The mind steps into places where natural intelligence was already working perfectly. And in trying to help, it often creates the very problem it wants to solve. Sometimes, peace does not require more effort. Sometimes it begins the moment we stop interfering with what already knows how to flow on its own. What the centipede teaches us about peace. After hearing the centipede's story, it is easy to laugh and think, of course she couldn't walk after thinking about every leg. But before we laugh too quickly, we should ask ourselves an honest question. How often do we do exactly the same thing? You may have experienced it before. You meet someone new, and the conversation begins naturally. Then suddenly you start wondering, do they like me? Did that sound stupid? What should I say next? Within seconds, the conversation feels awkward. Or perhaps you have lain awake at night, desperate to sleep. You check the clock. You calculate how many hours remain before morning. You worry about being tired tomorrow. You try harder to fall asleep. And the harder you try, the more awake you become. The body already knows how to sleep, just as the centipede already knew how to walk. But the thinking mind jumps in and starts giving instructions. The same thing happens with happiness. Many people spend years trying to figure out the perfect life, the perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect version of themselves. They believe peace will arrive once everything is finally arranged correctly. Yet life continues to feel heavy, not because they are doing something wrong, but because they are constantly trying to control what cannot be controlled. The centipede's problem was never her legs. Our problem is rarely the situation itself. The real struggle often comes from the endless mental effort of trying to manage every detail of life. Sometimes, the deepest wisdom is surprisingly simple. Trust what already knows. Trust the breath. Trust the body. Trust this moment. And allow life to move one step at a time instead of trying to solve the entire journey at once. If you've ever realized that overthinking has made a simple situation harder than it needed to be, type 1 in the comments below. You may discover that you are not alone. Millions of people are fighting the same invisible battle inside their own minds every single day. The Buddha holds up a flower. One day, thousands of monks gathered on Vulture Peak to hear the Buddha teach. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation. Some had traveled for days to attend. Others carried notebooks, eager to record every word. Many expected a profound discourse on enlightenment, suffering, or the path to liberation. The Buddha slowly took his seat before the assembly. The crowd became completely silent. Every eye was fixed upon him. Then, instead of beginning a sermon, the Buddha reached beside him and picked up a single white lotus flower. He held it up for everyone to see and said nothing. A minute passed, then another. The silence stretched on. The monks began to wonder what was happening. Surely, this was the introduction to an important teaching. Perhaps the flower symbolized purity. Perhaps it represented enlightenment rising from the mud of suffering. Perhaps it was a metaphor for impermanence. The longer the Buddha remained silent, the harder the assembly worked. Thousands of minds searched for meaning. Thousands of minds tried to solve the puzzle. They analyzed. They interpreted. They compared. They searched through everything they had learned in hopes of discovering the hidden message. But the Buddha continued holding the flower, still silent, still present, still unmoving. Then, something remarkable happened. Among the thousands of listeners, only one person smiled. Mahakasyapa. He did not smile because he had found an answer. He smiled because, for a moment, he stopped looking for one. While everyone else was busy thinking about the flower, he simply saw the flower. White petals, a green stem, a living flower existing exactly as it was. Nothing more, nothing less. At that moment, the Buddha nodded. The teaching had been received, not through words, not through explanation, but through direct experience. The others were searching for meaning hidden behind the flower. Mahakasyapa was simply meeting the flower itself, and in that simple act, he touched something deeper than any concept could ever explain. The difference between thinking about life and experiencing life. The monks on Vulture Peak were not foolish. They were sincere students. They wanted to understand the truth. But in that moment, they revealed a habit that all human beings share. The moment we encounter something, we immediately begin explaining it. A beautiful sunset appears. Instead of simply seeing it, the mind says, "That's beautiful." Then it compares it to other sunsets. It remembers similar moments. It wonders whether to take a photograph. Within seconds, the mind has moved away from the direct experience itself. The same thing happens throughout daily life. You drink a cup of tea, but your mind is thinking about tomorrow. You walk through a park, but your attention is trapped in yesterday. You sit with your family, but your thoughts are somewhere else entirely. Physically present, mentally absent. This constant interpretation is exhausting. The mind rarely allows experience to be simple. It wants to label everything, judge everything, understand everything, control everything. Yet the Buddha's flower pointed toward a different way of living. A flower does not need to be explained before it can be appreciated. The warmth of sunlight does not require analysis before it can be felt. A bird's song does not become more beautiful because we understand it. Life is already happening before thought arrives to describe it. Mahakasyapa saw this directly. For a brief moment, he stopped searching for hidden meanings. He stopped translating reality into concepts. He stopped trying to turn experience into knowledge. And because he stopped, he was finally able to see. This is one of the great paradoxes of Buddhist wisdom. The more desperately we seek peace, the further away it seems. The moment we stop chasing it, we begin to notice that peace was quietly present all along, hidden beneath the endless noise of interpretation. Like the flower in the Buddha's hand, reality has always been here, waiting patiently for us to stop thinking about it long enough to actually experience it. Direct knowing, the wisdom beyond words. After the gathering ended, many monks continued discussing what had happened. Some debated the meaning of the flower for days. Others tried to explain why Mahakasyapa smiled. They wanted to understand the event intellectually, but the deeper lesson could not be captured by discussion alone. Imagine trying to explain the taste of honey to someone who has never tasted it. You could describe its sweetness. You could compare it to sugar. You could write books about its texture and flavor. Yet no description, no matter how detailed, could replace a single drop placed on the tongue. The experience itself is different from the explanation. This is what the Buddha was pointing toward. There is a kind of knowing that exists before words. A musician experiences it while playing a familiar melody. Their fingers move naturally without needing instructions. A skilled baker experiences it while kneading dough. Their hands recognize the perfect texture before the mind can explain why. A gardener experiences it while tending plants. They simply know when something needs water, sunlight, or time. This knowing does not come from thinking. It comes from direct contact with reality. The modern world trains us to trust only analysis. We are taught to calculate, compare, evaluate, and explain. These abilities are valuable, but when they become constant, they create fatigue. The mind never stops working, never stops processing, never stops searching for conclusions. The result is a life lived through concepts rather than through experience. Yet every once in a while, a quiet moment breaks through, perhaps while watching rain fall outside a window, perhaps while listening to waves reach the shore, perhaps while sitting alone beneath a night sky filled with stars. For a few seconds, there is no need to explain anything, no need to solve anything, no need to become anything. There is only seeing, only hearing, only being. These moments are often brief, but they reveal something important. Peace is not always found by adding more understanding. Sometimes, it appears when understanding temporarily steps aside and allows reality to speak for itself. That was the gift hidden inside the Buddha's silent flower. A reminder that some truths can only be experienced, never explained. The blind monk, who saw more than everyone else. There once lived a man named Sona, who was blind from birth. From the moment he entered the world, he had never seen a sunrise, a mountain, a flower, or even his own reflection. To most people, this seemed like a terrible limitation. Many assumed that a person who could not see would struggle to understand life. Yet something remarkable happened. While others spent their lives distracted by appearances, Sona learned to experience the world in a completely different way. He recognized people by the sound of their footsteps. He knew someone's mood by the tone of their voice. He felt the warmth of sunlight on his skin. He listened to the wind moving through trees. He noticed subtle details that sighted people often overlooked. When Sona eventually became a monk, many wondered how he could possibly study the Dharma without reading scriptures or observing the rituals around him. But the Buddha welcomed him warmly. The Dharma is not found only in books, he said. It is found in direct experience. So Sona listened. While other students were distracted by movements around them, Sona focused completely on the teachings. When others looked around the room, he remained present. When others became fascinated by appearances, he stayed connected to what was actually happening. Year after year, his practice deepened. He began to notice something profound. Most people were not seeing reality itself. They were seeing their ideas about reality. A person sees a face and immediately creates a story. A person sees an object and labels it beautiful or ugly. A person sees success and calls it happiness. A person sees failure and calls it suffering. The mind never stops judging, labeling, and interpreting. Sona could not rely on appearances. Because of that, he developed a deeper way of knowing. He learned to experience life directly before the mind had a chance to create a story about it. And eventually, that direct way of seeing led him to a profound awakening. Ironically, the man who could not see with his eyes began to see reality more clearly than many people who could. For Sona discovered a truth that most of us forget. Sometimes we are not exhausted because life is difficult. We are exhausted because we are constantly interpreting life instead of simply experiencing it. What Sona discovered about the tired mind. The more the other monks listened to Sona, the more they realized that his blindness had revealed something important about the human mind. Every single day, our eyes feed us an endless stream of information. Faces, objects, screens, advertisements, news, messages, colors, movements. Thousands upon thousands of visual impressions flow into the mind from the moment we wake up until the moment we fall asleep, and the mind immediately begins its work. It compares, it judges, it labels, it creates stories. You see someone driving an expensive car, and the mind instantly creates a story. You see a photo online and compare your life to theirs. You see a wrinkle on your face and begin worrying about aging. You see a message with no reply and imagine dozens of possible explanations. Most of the time, we don't even notice this process happening. It feels automatic, normal, but it consumes enormous energy. Sona realized that reality itself is often much simpler than the stories we create about it. A sound is just a sound. A sensation is just a sensation. A thought is just a thought. But the mind rarely leaves things alone. It turns a small worry into a disaster. It turns a simple mistake into proof of failure. It turns uncertainty into fear. It takes one moment and builds an entire world around it. This is why two people can experience the same event and react completely differently. One person receives criticism and suffers for weeks. Another receives the same criticism and lets it pass within minutes. The difference is not the event itself. The difference is the story attached to it. Sona learned to live closer to direct experience. When he felt warmth, he simply felt warmth. When he heard birds singing, he simply heard birds singing. When sadness appeared, he noticed sadness. When joy appeared, he noticed joy. He did not immediately build a narrative around every experience, and because of that, his mind carried a lightness that many others admired. The Buddha often taught that suffering is not created only by what happens to us. It is created by our attachment to what happens, by our resistance, by our constant need to explain, control, and hold on. Sona's life became a living example of this teaching. The world around him had not changed, but his relationship with experience had changed completely. And perhaps this is the invitation hidden within his story. What if, just for a moment, you stopped trying to figure everything out? What if you allowed this breath to simply be a breath? This sound to simply be a sound? This moment to simply be this moment? You may discover what Sona discovered long ago. That beneath all the mental commentary, beneath all the stories and interpretations, there is a quiet place within you that has been peaceful all along. The monk who could recite perfectly alone. In a mountain monastery, there lived a young monk named Chen. Among all the students, he was known for his beautiful recitations. Every morning before sunrise, while the monastery remained silent, Chen would sit alone in his small room and chant the sutras he had memorized over the years. His voice flowed naturally. The words came effortlessly. There were no mistakes, no hesitation, no uncertainty. Anyone who listened would have believed he was one of the most gifted monks in the monastery. But there was a strange problem. Whenever Chen was asked to recite those same sutras during a public ceremony, everything changed. The moment he stood in front of the other monks, his confidence disappeared. His voice trembled. Simple passages suddenly felt difficult. Words he knew perfectly seemed to vanish from his memory. Sometimes, he forgot entire sections he had repeated hundreds of times in private. After every ceremony, Chen left feeling embarrassed and frustrated. He could not understand what was wrong. The sutras had not changed. His knowledge had not disappeared. He knew the words. So why did he fail whenever others were watching? The more he worried about the problem, the worse it became. Before every public recitation, anxiety would already begin building inside him. What if I make a mistake? What if everyone notices? What if they think I am incompetent? These thoughts followed him like shadows. Soon, reciting became less about the sutras and more about fear. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment, fear of embarrassment. One evening, the headmaster quietly observed Chen after another difficult performance. The old teacher noticed something important. The problem was not Chen's memory. The problem was not his ability. Something else was interfering. Something invisible. Something that affects nearly every human being at one time or another. And the next morning, the master decided it was time to help Chen discover what it was. The watcher inside your mind. The next morning, Master Hui invited Chen to his room. I want you to recite the Heart Sutra for me, he said. Relieved that there would be only one listener, Chen agreed. When he arrived, however, something familiar happened. Even though only the master was present, anxiety immediately appeared. His voice became uncertain. He stumbled over words he knew by heart. He forgot lines he had recited perfectly just hours earlier. After several failed attempts, Master Hui gently asked a question. Chen, who is reciting right now? The young monk looked confused. I am, Master. And who is listening? You are. The master remained silent for a moment. Then he asked again. Look carefully. Who else is listening? Suddenly, Chen understood. there was another listener in the room. Not a real person, a voice inside his own mind. A watcher. While he was reciting, another part of him was constantly observing, judging, comparing, evaluating, listening for mistakes, predicting failure, worrying about what others might think. Part of him was speaking, another part was watching the speaking, and that division was draining all his energy. Master Hui smiled. When you are alone, he explained, there is only reciting, but when you become self-conscious, there are two of you, one doing the action and one judging the action. The watcher interrupts what would otherwise flow naturally. The truth struck Chen deeply. How much of his suffering came not from life itself, but from constantly watching himself live? How often did he judge his own words before they were spoken? How often did he criticize himself while trying to do something simple? The watcher believed it was helping. It believed it was protecting him from mistakes. But in reality, it was creating the very fear and tension it wanted to prevent. For the first time, Chen saw clearly that the greatest obstacle was not outside him. It was the endless voice inside that never stopped monitoring, measuring, and judging every moment of his life. When the watcher finally steps back, after their conversation, Master Hui asked Chen to try again. But this time, he gave him different instructions. Forget about me, the master said softly. Forget about yourself as well. Don't try to sound good. Don't try to avoid mistakes. Don't try to perform. Simply let the words arise and pass. At first, Chen didn't understand. For years, he had believed improvement came through more effort, more concentration, more control, more self-monitoring. Yet all of that effort had only made him more tense. Still, he closed his eyes and took a slow breath. For a moment, he stopped worrying about success. He stopped wondering how he sounded. He stopped imagining what others might think. He stopped trying to control every word before it appeared. And then, something unexpected happened. The sutra began to flow. One line followed another. Natural, effortless, clear. There was no struggle, no hesitation, no fear. When he finished, Chen realized something remarkable. He had completely forgotten about the master sitting in the room. More importantly, he had forgotten about himself. For those few minutes, there had been no performer and no audience, no speaker and no judge, only the words themselves. This experience revealed a truth that reaches far beyond reciting sutras. Many people spend their entire lives trapped by the watcher. They cannot enjoy a conversation because they are busy judging their own words. They cannot relax because they are constantly checking whether they are relaxed enough. They cannot enjoy success because they are already evaluating whether it is sufficient. Even moments of happiness become work because the watcher never stops measuring and comparing. The strange thing is that the watcher promises safety. It says, if I keep monitoring everything, nothing will go wrong. But reality shows the opposite. The more we monitor ourselves, the more anxious we become. The more we judge ourselves, the more unnatural life feels. The more we try to control every moment, the more exhausted we grow. True peace begins when the watcher loosens its grip, not because we force it away, not because we fight it, but because we become so fully present that there is no room left for constant self-observation. In those moments, life flows by itself. Just as Chen discovered, what we are searching for is often already here, hidden beneath the endless noise of self-judgment. When the watcher steps back, even briefly, the mind remembers something it has forgotten for a very long time. How to simply be. The mother who lost everything. There once lived a woman named Uberi. Long before her tragedy, she had been admired throughout the city for her beauty and elegance. People knew her name. They praised her appearance. They envied her life. But none of those things mattered after her daughter was born. The little girl, Jiva, became the center of her world. Her laughter filled the house with joy. Her tiny footsteps brought life to every room. Every morning began with her smile, and every evening ended with the comfort of knowing she was safe nearby. Like many parents, Uberi quietly believed there would always be more time, more conversations, more laughter, more days together. Then, without warning, illness arrived. A fever took hold of the child. The family searched desperately for help. Healers were called. Medicines were prepared. Prayers were offered. But nothing changed the outcome. Within a few days, Jiva was gone. The world that Uberi knew collapsed. The house felt empty. The silence became unbearable. Every object reminded her of what she had lost. The small places where her daughter used to sit, The familiar sounds that no longer existed, the future she had imagined disappeared overnight. After the funeral, Aubrey could not accept reality. Every day, she wandered to the cremation grounds where bodies were burned. She searched among the ashes. She called her daughter's name again and again, as if somehow the child would answer, as if love alone could bring her back. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. People began whispering about her. Some pitied her. Others avoided her. But Aubrey barely noticed. She no longer cared about food, sleep, or appearance. Her entire identity had become one thing: a mother searching for a child who would never return. Her grief consumed every thought, every breath, every moment. And standing in the middle of that unbearable sorrow, she could see no way out. The question that changed everything. One morning, as Aubrey wandered once again through the cremation grounds, she heard a gentle voice call her name. It was the Buddha. He had seen many forms of suffering throughout his life. He had witnessed grief, fear, anger, and despair in countless people. But when he looked at Aubrey, he saw a woman completely consumed by loss. She was no longer living in the present. Her mind existed only in the past, only in memories, only in longing, only in the impossible wish that life would return to the way it once was. The Buddha approached her calmly. "Why are you crying?" he asked. "My daughter," Aubrey replied through tears. "I am searching for my daughter." The Buddha nodded gently. Then he asked a question she never expected. "Which daughter are you crying for?" Aubrey stared at him in confusion. "My daughter, Jiva," she answered. But the Buddha continued. "In this cremation ground alone, thousands upon thousands of daughters have been brought here. Thousands of mothers have stood where you are standing. Thousands have cried the same tears you are crying now." His words struck her like a bell ringing through the fog of her grief. For months, she had believed her suffering was unique. She had become trapped inside the story of my loss, my daughter, my pain, my tragedy. But suddenly, she saw something larger. Every person she had ever passed on the street carried losses of their own. Every family had known separation. Every human heart had experienced the pain of loving something that could not stay forever. The Buddha was not telling her that her grief was unimportant. He was showing her that grief is part of the human condition itself. No one escapes it. No amount of love can prevent impermanence. No amount of wishing can stop change. Everything that comes together will one day separate. Everything that begins will one day end. For the first time since her daughter died, Aubrey stopped calling her name. She stood silently among the ashes. And slowly, something inside her began to soften. Not because the pain disappeared, not because the loss was suddenly acceptable, but because she was beginning to see reality as it truly was. She realized she was not being punished. Life had not singled her out. She was experiencing the same truth that every human being eventually faces. To love is to risk loss. To live is to experience change. And suffering grows deepest when we demand that what is temporary should somehow remain forever. What Aubrey finally understood about letting go. As the Buddha's words settled into her heart, Aubrey began to see something she had never noticed before. For months, she thought her suffering came from losing her daughter. But now she realized there was another layer to her pain. A deeper layer. She had not only lost her daughter, she had been fighting reality itself. Every day, she returned to the cremation ground, carrying the same silent demand. This should not have happened. My daughter should still be here. Life should be different from what it is. Without realizing it, she was arguing with something that could never be changed. And that argument was exhausting her. The Buddha often taught that pain is a natural part of life, but much of our suffering comes from resistance. Pain is losing someone you love. Suffering is spending months or years demanding that the loss never happened. Pain is change. Suffering is refusing to accept change. Pain is part of being human. Suffering often comes from our struggle against what is already true. As Aubrey stood among the ashes, she looked around with new eyes. Every handful of ash had once been someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend, someone's beloved. The entire world was built upon meetings and partings. People arrived. People stayed for a while. People left. This was not a mistake in the design of life. This was life. And for the first time, she stopped asking, "Why me?" Instead, she began asking a different question. How can I live wisely knowing that everything changes? That question transformed her, not overnight, not in a dramatic flash of enlightenment, but slowly, like ice melting beneath the warmth of spring sunlight. She still loved her daughter. She always would. But she no longer built her entire identity around her grief. She no longer woke up each morning searching for what could never return. She no longer defined herself as the broken mother who had lost everything. The loss remained. The love remained. But the endless struggle began to fade. This is one of the most difficult lessons in Buddhism. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean loving less. It does not mean pretending something never mattered. It means making peace with the fact that nothing in this world can be held forever. And strangely, when we stop trying to hold on so tightly, life becomes lighter. The heart becomes softer, and the mind finally begins to rest. What Ubari finally understood about letting go. As the Buddha's words settled into her heart, Ubari began to see something she had never noticed before. For months, she thought her suffering came from losing her daughter. But now, she realized there was another layer to her pain. A deeper layer. She had not only lost her daughter, she had been fighting reality itself. Every day she returned to the cremation ground, carrying the same silent demand. This should not have happened. My daughter should still be here. Life should be different from what it is. Without realizing it, she was arguing with something that could never be changed. And that argument was exhausting her. The Buddha often taught that pain is a natural part of life, but much of our suffering comes from resistance. Pain is losing someone you love. Suffering is spending months or years demanding that the loss never happened. Pain is change. Suffering is refusing to accept change. Pain is part of being human. Suffering often comes from our struggle against what is already true. As Ubari stood among the ashes, she looked around with new eyes. Every handful of ash had once been someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend, someone's beloved. The entire world was built upon meetings and partings. People arrived, people stayed for a while, people left. This was not a mistake in the design of life. This was life. And for the first time, she stopped asking, "Why me?" Instead, she began asking a different question. How can I live wisely, knowing that everything changes? That question transformed her. Not overnight, not in a dramatic flash of enlightenment, but slowly, like ice melting beneath the warmth of spring sunlight. She still loved her daughter. She always would. But she no longer built her entire identity around her grief. She no longer woke up each morning, searching for what could never return. She no longer defined herself as the broken mother who had lost everything. The loss remained. The love remained. But the endless struggle began to fade. This is one of the most difficult lessons in Buddhism. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean loving less. It does not mean pretending something never mattered. It means making peace with the fact that nothing in this world can be held forever. And strangely, when we stop trying to hold on so tightly, life becomes lighter, the heart becomes softer, and the mind finally begins to rest. The burden of carrying a story. Most people think suffering comes from what happened, but very often, suffering continues because of the story we keep carrying afterward. This was the hidden burden Ubari had been carrying. Her daughter's death was real, the pain was real, the loneliness was real. But month after month, she was carrying something else as well. A story. A story that repeated itself every day. I am the mother who lost her child. My life is broken. I can never be whole again. The mind repeated these thoughts so often that they began to feel like absolute truth. And this is something all of us do. A person loses a relationship and begins saying, I will never be loved again. Someone fails at a goal and starts believing, I am a failure. Someone is betrayed and decides, I can never trust anyone. The event happens once, but the story is repeated thousands of times, and each repetition deepens the wound. The Buddha understood this deeply. He saw that human beings often suffer twice. First from life itself, then from the identity they build around what happened. The first pain may be unavoidable. The second pain is often self-created. Ubari began to see this clearly. She had become attached not only to her daughter, but also to the image of herself as a grieving mother. Without realizing it, her suffering had become part of who she believed she was. And letting go felt frightening because it seemed like letting go of her daughter. But they were not the same thing. She could continue loving Jiva without carrying endless suffering. She could remember her daughter without living inside grief forever. She could honor the past without becoming trapped in it. This realization did not erase her sadness. It simply gave her space to breathe again. And perhaps that is one of the most compassionate lessons Buddhism offers. You do not need to erase your memories. You do not need to deny your pain. You do not need to pretend that loss does not hurt. But you also do not need to spend the rest of your life carrying a story that keeps reopening the wound. At some point, healing begins when we gently set the story down and return to the simple reality of this moment. One breath, one step, one day at a time. The leaves that knew how to let go. Not long after hearing stories of grief and loss, a young student arrived at the hermitage of an old Zen master. The student had spent years studying meditation. He had read countless teachings. He had practiced breathing exercises, concentration techniques, and mindfulness methods. Yet despite all his effort, one problem remained. His thoughts never stopped. The moment he sat down to meditate, his mind became crowded. Memories appeared. Plans appeared. Worries appeared. Questions appeared. One thought led to another, and before long, he felt trapped inside an endless stream of thinking. Frustrated and exhausted, he finally traveled to seek the master's advice. When he arrived, he found the old teacher sitting beneath a large maple tree. It was autumn. Golden and red leaves covered the branches overhead. The student bowed respectfully. "Master," he said, "I have come because my mind never becomes quiet. No matter what I do, thoughts keep appearing. I try to stop them, but they return. I try to control them, but they grow stronger. Please tell me how to make my thoughts disappear." The master listened without interrupting. Just then, a cool wind moved through the branches. Several leaves loosened their grip and drifted gently toward the ground. The master watched them fall. One leaf spun slowly in the air. Another floated, almost effortlessly. A third landed softly beside his feet. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he looked at the student. "Did you see those leaves?" he asked. "Yes, master." "Did you make them fall?" "No." "Did the tree force them to stay?" The student thought for a moment. "No, master." The old teacher smiled. "The leaves remain when conditions support them. They fall when conditions change. Neither the tree nor the leaves struggle against what is happening." The student listened carefully. The master pointed toward another leaf, drifting through the air. "Your thoughts are much the same. They arise when conditions are present. They remain for a while. Then they pass away. Yet you spend all your energy trying to control them, hold them, reject them, or force them to disappear." The student looked up at the falling leaves. For the first time, he wondered whether the problem was not the thoughts themselves. Perhaps the problem was his constant battle against them. Thoughts are not the problem. The student sat quietly beneath the maple tree, watching leaves drift through the autumn air. For years, he had treated every thought like an enemy. When worries appeared, he fought them. When memories appeared, he tried to push them away. When fears arose, he searched for techniques to eliminate them. The harder he struggled, the more exhausted he became. The master seemed to sense exactly what was happening in his mind. "Tell me," the old teacher said softly, "when a cloud appears in the sky, do you become angry at it?" "No, master." "When rain falls, do you command it to stop?" "No." "When the wind blows, do you demand that it change direction?" The student shook his head. "Of course not." The master nodded. "Then why do you treat your thoughts differently?" The question landed deeply. The student had never considered it before. He had assumed that peace meant having fewer thoughts. He believed enlightenment meant achieving a perfectly silent mind. But perhaps he had misunderstood from the very beginning. The master picked up a fallen leaf and held it in his hand. "This leaf appeared because conditions allowed it to grow," he said. "The sun, the rain, the soil, the tree, none of it happened by force." He released the leaf and let it fall. And now it falls because conditions have changed. The student watched the leaf settle onto the earth. In that moment, he began to understand. Thoughts arise the same way. A sound triggers a memory triggers an emotion triggers another thought. Most of this happens automatically, without permission, without planning, without control. The mind is constantly responding to conditions. The problem is not that thoughts appear. The problem is that we believe we must manage every single one. We chase pleasant thoughts. We resist unpleasant thoughts. We argue with fearful thoughts. We cling to hopeful thoughts. And in doing so, we create endless inner conflict. The master smiled gently. "Leave thoughts alone long enough," he said, "and they will teach you something important. Like the leaves, they already know how to come and go. It is only your grasping that makes them stay longer than necessary." For the first time in many years, the student felt a small sense of relief. Perhaps peace was not waiting at the end of a battle. Perhaps peace began when the battle itself finally ended. The freedom of letting thoughts pass. The wind continued moving through the branches above them. Leaves drifted down one by one, covering the ground in shades of gold and crimson. The student watched quietly. Something inside him was beginning to change. For years, he had approached meditation like a soldier entering a battlefield. Every thought was an opponent. Every distraction was a failure. Every wandering moment was proof that he was doing something wrong. No wonder he felt exhausted. He wasn't practicing peace. He was fighting a war. The master seemed to understand this perfectly. "You believe your suffering comes from thoughts," he said. "But look carefully. Thoughts appear for a moment and then begin to fade. What keeps them alive is not the thought itself. It is your resistance to it." The student considered this. He remembered lying awake at night. A small worry would appear, perhaps something he needed to do tomorrow. On its own, the thought might have lasted only a few seconds. But then another thought followed. What if something goes wrong? Then another. What if I fail? Then another. Why am I still thinking about this? Soon, an entire hour had passed. Not because of one thought, but because of his struggle with it. The master picked up a handful of fallen leaves. "If I close my fist around these leaves," he said, squeezing tightly, "I must use effort." Then he opened his hand. The leaves slipped away naturally. No effort is needed to let go. The student suddenly saw the pattern that had governed much of his life. He wasn't tired because he had thoughts. He was tired because he kept grabbing them, holding them, examining them, arguing with them, carrying them long after they were ready to leave. Most thoughts are like visitors. They knock on the door, stay briefly, then move on. But the mind often invites them inside, gives them a room, feeds them attention, and then wonders why they refuse to leave. The old master smiled. "You do not need to force thoughts away. You do not need to chase silence. Simply notice what arrives and notice what leaves." The student looked again at the falling leaves. Some fell quickly, others lingered in the air, but every one of them eventually reached the ground. None needed his help, and for the first time, he began to understand that thoughts worked the same way. Perhaps peace was never about controlling the mind. Perhaps it was about trusting the natural wisdom that already knew how to let go. The mind knows how to settle. As the afternoon sun began to fade, the student sat beneath the maple tree in silence. For the first time, he was not trying to fix himself, not trying to stop thinking, not trying to become enlightened, just sitting, just breathing, just watching. And something surprising happened. His thoughts continued to appear, but they no longer felt like enemies. A memory came, then it passed. A worry appeared, then it faded. A random thought drifted through his mind like a leaf carried by the wind. Then it too disappeared. The master watched quietly and finally spoke. "Do you see now?" The student nodded. For years, he had believed peace would come when his thoughts stopped. Now he understood something different. Peace was available even while thoughts continued to arise. Because peace was not the absence of thinking. It was the absence of struggle. The sky does not fight the clouds. The river does not fight the current. The tree does not fight the seasons. Everything in nature allows change to happen naturally. Only the human mind insists on resisting what is already moving. As evening approached, the student felt lighter than he had in years. Nothing outside had changed. The world was exactly the same, but his relationship with his thoughts had changed. And sometimes, that small shift is enough to transform everything. For when you stop trying to control every thought, the mind slowly remembers something it has known all along. How to rest. A quiet truth to carry with you. Before the student left the hermitage, he asked the master one final question. "Master, if I forget this lesson tomorrow, what should I do?" The old teacher smiled. "Then begin again." The answer seemed almost too simple, but as the student reflected on it, he realized that this was the heart of the practice. Not perfection, not permanent calm, not a mind that never wanders. Simply beginning again, again and again, because thoughts will return. Some days the mind will feel peaceful, other days it will feel crowded and restless. There will be moments when you remember to let go, and moments when you become lost in worry, fear, or endless thinking. That is part of being human. The goal is not to become someone who never gets caught in thoughts. The goal is to notice more quickly when you have been caught, to gently return, to stop fighting, to stop judging, to stop turning every passing thought into a problem that needs solving. The leaves will continue to fall. The seasons will continue to change. Thoughts will continue to arise and disappear. Life will keep moving exactly as it always has. But now you may begin to see it differently. not as a battle to win, not as a puzzle to solve, but as a river flowing moment by moment. And perhaps tonight, as you rest and listen to the sound of your own breathing, you can remember the lesson of the maple tree. You do not have to hold on to every thought. You do not have to follow every worry. You do not have to carry every story. Like the leaves, they can simply come, and like the leaves, they can simply go. Story 8. The river that never holds anything. Years later, another student came to a Zen master with a different problem. Unlike the young man under the maple tree, this student did not struggle with restless thoughts. He struggled with attachment. "I cannot let things go," he confessed. "I replay old conversations. I carry old regrets. I keep thinking about people who hurt me. Even when I want to move on, part of me keeps holding on." The master listened quietly. Then he invited the student for a walk. They followed a narrow path that wound through the mountains until they reached a river. The water flowed steadily between smooth stones. Without stopping, it moved around every obstacle in its path. The master pointed toward the river. "Tell me," he asked, "what do you see?" "A river," the student replied. "What else?" The student looked more carefully. "The water keeps moving." The master nodded. "Have you ever seen a river hold on to yesterday's water?" The student smiled. "No." "Have you ever seen it refuse today's rain because it preferred yesterday's?" "No, master." The old teacher crouched beside the riverbank and scooped up a handful of water. For a moment, the water rested in his palm. Then it slipped through his fingers and returned to the current below. "That is why the river remains clear," he said. "It does not cling." The student stood silently. The words felt simple, yet they touched something deep within him. His mind was doing exactly the opposite. Every disappointment, every mistake, every painful memory, he collected them all. He carried them year after year, like stones in a backpack growing heavier with each step. The river carried nothing, and because it carried nothing, it remained free to keep flowing. As they stood there, listening to the water move across the rocks, the student began to wonder how much of his suffering came not from what had happened, but from everything he continued to hold long after life itself had already moved on. "What are you still carrying?" The master and the student remained by the river for a long time. Neither spoke. The water itself seemed to be teaching. Every second, new water arrived. Every second, old water disappeared. Nothing stayed. Nothing resisted. Nothing tried to hold on. Finally, the master broke the silence. "When a branch falls into the river, what happens?" "The river carries it away," the student replied. "And when leaves fall onto the surface, the river carries them too." The master nodded. "Then why are you different?" The question lingered in the air. The student immediately thought about all the things he had been carrying. The argument from years ago that still replayed in his mind. The person who betrayed him. The opportunity he missed. The mistake he wished he could undo. None of those things existed anymore. The moments themselves were gone. Yet he continued carrying them as if they had happened yesterday. The master picked up a small stone from the riverbank. "If I throw this into the water, the river does not complain." He tossed the stone into the current. Ripples spread across the surface and then vanished. The river receives it and continues flowing. The student watched the ripples disappear. Slowly, he began to understand. Life is constantly placing things into our hands. Success and failure, praise and criticism, gain and loss, love and heartbreak. None of them are meant to stay forever. Yet the mind often grabs hold and refuses to release them. The result is a life spent looking backward instead of living forward. The river taught a different lesson. Receive what comes. Allow it to pass. Keep flowing. Because the longer we cling to what is already gone, the heavier the journey becomes. And sometimes the greatest act of wisdom is not learning how to hold on. It is learning how to gently open the hand. The weight of holding on. As they continued walking beside the river, the student began to notice something he had never fully understood before. The events he carried were not what exhausted him. The carrying itself was. A painful memory from 10 years ago could still ruin an entire day. A careless comment from someone long gone could still trigger anger. A mistake made in youth could still create shame decades later. The events had ended, but the mind kept reopening them. Again, and again, and again. The master stopped near a bend in the river, where the current moved swiftly around several large rocks. "Look carefully," he said. "The river does not stop because of these stones." The student watched the water flow. The rocks remained. The river did not try to remove them. It did not argue with them. It did not build its identity around them. It simply flowed around them and continued on its way. Many people believe peace comes when every obstacle disappears, the master said. But peace often begins when we stop demanding that life be different from what it already is. The student thought about this deeply. Most of his suffering came from arguments with reality. He argued with the past. He argued with mistakes. He argued with people who had already left his life. He argued with circumstances he could no longer change. And every argument drained his energy. The river offered another possibility, not surrender as defeat, not resignation, but acceptance. The quiet recognition that some things have already happened. Some chapters have already ended. Some doors have already closed. And no amount of thinking can reopen them. As the sun reflected across the moving water, the student felt something inside him begin to loosen. Perhaps letting go was not losing something valuable. Perhaps letting go was finally putting down a burden he was never meant to carry forever. Like the river, life was asking him to keep moving, not because the past did not matter, but because the present moment was still flowing, still alive, and still waiting for him to enter it fully. The freedom hidden in acceptance. The student sat beside the river as evening settled over the valley. The master's words continued echoing in his mind. For years, he had believed acceptance meant weakness. He thought accepting reality meant giving up, giving in, losing. But now, watching the river move effortlessly through the landscape, he began to see acceptance differently. The river accepted every bend in its path. It accepted the rocks. It accepted the fallen branches. It accepted the changing seasons. Yet none of this made the river weak. In fact, its strength came from that very acceptance, because it did not waste energy fighting what already existed. The student suddenly realized how much of his life had been spent resisting reality. He resisted getting older. He resisted mistakes from the past. He resisted disappointments. He resisted people who did not behave the way he wanted. He resisted endings. And every act of resistance created another layer of suffering. The event itself caused pain, but the refusal to accept it multiplied that pain. The Buddha often taught that suffering grows when we cling to what cannot remain and resist what cannot be avoided. Everything changes. Relationships change. Bodies change. Fortunes change. Even the thoughts moving through your mind right now are changing. Yet the mind often demands permanence from an impermanent world. It says, this moment should last forever. This person should never leave. This success should never end. This pain should not exist. And when life refuses to obey those demands, suffering appears. The river taught the opposite lesson. Flow with what is. Meet each moment as it arrives. Release it when it leaves. Trust the movement of life. As darkness slowly covered the water, the student felt a quiet peace he had not known for many years. His problems had not disappeared. His past had not changed, but his struggle against them had softened. And in that softening, he discovered something unexpected. Acceptance was not the end of peace. It was the beginning of it. Like the river, he did not need to control every turn in the journey. He only needed the courage to keep flowing forward. Let the river teach you. Before the student left, the master offered one final piece of wisdom. Remember, he said, the river is peaceful not because nothing enters it. Branches fall into it. Mud enters it. Storms disturb it. Yet it keeps flowing. The student looked at the water one last time. He understood. Peace is not the absence of problems. It is the absence of resistance. Many people spend their lives waiting for a perfect moment before allowing themselves to be at peace. They think, I'll relax when this problem is solved. I'll be happy when everything is under control. I'll feel calm when life finally goes my way. But that day rarely comes. Life continues changing. New challenges appear. New uncertainties arise. The river does not wait for a perfect path before it flows. It flows because flowing is its nature. The same is true for you. You do not need a perfect life to experience peace. You do not need every answer. You do not need complete control. You only need to stop fighting every twist and turn of the journey. As the student walked away from the river, he carried no special technique, no secret method, no complicated philosophy, only a simple understanding. Life moves. Everything changes. And the more gently we move with that change, the lighter the heart becomes. Like water, true wisdom is not found in holding on. It is found in learning how to flow. Let the river teach you. Before the student left, the master offered one final piece of wisdom. Remember, he said, the river is peaceful not because nothing enters it. Branches fall into it. Mud enters it, storms disturb it, yet it keeps flowing. The student looked at the water one last time. He understood. Peace is not the absence of problems, it is the absence of resistance. Many people spend their lives waiting for a perfect moment before allowing themselves to be at peace. They think, I'll relax when this problem is solved. I'll be happy when everything is under control. I'll feel calm when life finally goes my way. But that day rarely comes. Life continues changing. New challenges appear. New uncertainties arise. The river does not wait for a perfect path before it flows. It flows because flowing is its nature. The same is true for you. You do not need a perfect life to experience peace. You do not need every answer. You do not need complete control. You only need to stop fighting every twist and turn of the journey. As the student walked away from the river, he carried no special technique, no secret method, no complicated philosophy, only a simple understanding. Life moves. Everything changes. And the more gently we move with that change, the lighter the heart becomes. Like water, true wisdom is not found in holding on. It is found in learning how to flow. The boat that was empty. One evening, a man was rowing his small boat across a quiet river. The water was calm. The sky glowed with the soft colors of sunset. For the first time in days, he felt relaxed. He drifted peacefully with the current, enjoying the stillness around him. Then, in the distance, he noticed another boat moving toward him. At first, he paid little attention, but as the boat drew closer, he realized it was heading directly toward him. He frowned. Surely the other person would change direction. But the boat continued coming, closer, closer, straight toward him. His irritation began to rise. "Watch where you're going," he shouted. No response. The boat kept moving. His frustration quickly turned into anger. "What is wrong with this person?" he yelled. "Can't they see where they're going?" The boat was now only a few feet away. His heart raced. His jaw tightened. His entire body filled with tension. Just before the collision, he stood up, ready to unleash his anger on the careless stranger. Then the boats crashed together. The man looked inside the other boat and froze. There was nobody there. The boat was completely empty. Immediately, his anger vanished. The situation had not changed. The collision still happened. The boat was still damaged. The water was still disturbed. Yet the anger disappeared in an instant. Why? Because there was no one left to blame. No enemy. No insult. No personal attack. Only an empty boat drifting with the current. That night, as he sat alone reflecting on what had happened, he began to realize something profound. How many of his daily frustrations came not from events themselves, but from the stories he created about them? How often did he assume people were trying to hurt him, ignore him, disrespect him? And how often was he reacting not to reality, but to his own interpretation of reality? The empty boat had revealed something about the mind that years of thinking had never shown him. How much of your suffering comes from an empty boat? The man could not stop thinking about what had happened on the river. Just moments before the collision, he had been furious. His heart was pounding. His muscles were tense. His mind was preparing an entire argument against someone he believed had wronged him. Yet the moment he discovered the boat was empty, all that anger disappeared. Not gradually, instantly. The event itself had not changed. The collision still happened. The damage was still there. Only one thing changed. The story in his mind. This is what makes the parable of the empty boat so powerful. Most of the time, we do not react to reality itself. We react to the meaning we attach to reality. Someone fails to return our message. Immediately, the mind creates a story. They don't care about me. They're ignoring me. They're disrespecting me. A coworker speaks briefly to us. The mind invents another story. They must be upset with me. I probably did something wrong. A stranger cuts in front of us in traffic. Again, the story appears. What an selfish person. They did that on purpose. They have no respect for anyone. But what if the boat is empty? What if the person who ignored your message is simply overwhelmed? What if the coworker is struggling with something in their own life? What if the driver never even noticed you? The Buddha taught that much of human suffering comes from perception rather than reality. We rarely see events exactly as they are. Instead, we see them through layers of assumptions, fears, memories, and judgments. Then we react to those interpretations as if they were facts. The empty boat reminds us to pause, to look again, to question the story before believing it. Not every unpleasant event is a personal attack. Not every difficult interaction is intentional. Not every obstacle was sent to hurt you. Sometimes things simply happen, like an empty boat drifting down a river, and when you stop taking everything personally, an incredible amount of mental suffering begins to disappear. The world becomes lighter, the heart becomes softer, and the mind no longer wastes its energy fighting enemies that were never really there. The world becomes lighter when you stop taking everything personally. After understanding the lesson of the empty boat, the man began noticing something surprising in everyday life. Most of his anger had never come from events themselves. It came from the belief that everything was about him. If someone criticized him, he felt attacked. If someone disagreed with him, he felt threatened. If someone ignored him, he felt rejected. The mind automatically placed itself at the center of every situation, and because of that, ordinary events became sources of suffering. One day, he watched children playing near the riverbank. When one child accidentally bumped into another, the second child became upset for a moment. But seconds later, they were laughing again and running through the grass. There was no story, no grudge, no endless replaying of the event. The moment came and went. Adults often do the opposite. A single comment can be remembered for years. A small insult can become a permanent wound. A misunderstanding can grow into resentment that lasts decades. Not because the event was so powerful, but because the mind keeps feeding it attention. The Buddha often taught that attachment to the self creates endless suffering. The stronger our need to defend the image of me, the more easily we become offended. Every criticism feels personal. Every disagreement feels dangerous. Every inconvenience feels unfair. But when that attachment softens, something remarkable happens. Life becomes easier. People can have bad days without becoming your enemies. Someone can be rude without ruining your peace. A mistake can happen without becoming a personal disaster. Like the empty boat, many things that disturb us are not actually aimed at us at all. They are simply part of the movement of life. The wind blows. The river flows. People act according to their own fears, habits, and struggles. When we stop making everything personal, we stop carrying unnecessary burdens. And in that space, the heart discovers a freedom that anger and resentment could never provide. The boat was empty, and perhaps many of the burdens you carry today are emptier than you think. The cup that was already broken. One day, a young monk noticed his teacher holding a beautiful ceramic cup. The cup was simple but elegant. Its surface reflected the morning sunlight. The teacher seemed to admire it deeply. Curious, the monk asked, "Master, why do you look at that cup with such appreciation?" The old teacher smiled and gently turned the cup in his hands. Then he said something unexpected, "Because to me, this cup is already broken." The student was shocked. He looked carefully at the cup. There were no cracks, no chips, no damage at all. "It looks perfectly fine," he replied. "Why would you say it is already broken?" The master ran his fingers along the smooth edge of the cup. "One day it will fall, or someone will drop it, or time itself will weaken it. Eventually it will crack, shatter, and return to dust." The student remained silent. The teacher continued, "Because I understand this, I enjoy the cup completely while it is here. When I drink tea from it, I am grateful. When I hold it, I appreciate it. And when the day comes that it breaks, I will not be surprised." The monk pondered these words. Like most people, he lived as if the things he loved would remain forever. His youth, his health, his friendships, his family, his possessions, yet everything around him was constantly changing. The teacher was not being pessimistic. He was being realistic. The cup was precious precisely because it would not last. And perhaps life works the same way. We suffer when we expect temporary things to stay forever. We become shocked by changes that were always part of life. We cling to people as though they cannot leave. We cling to moments as though they cannot end. But the wisdom of the broken cup teaches something different. Love what you have. Appreciate it fully. Be grateful while it is here. But remember that everything you see is already changing. When you understand this deeply, you stop taking ordinary moments for granted. And strangely, instead of making life sadder, it makes life more beautiful. Because every moment becomes a gift rather than a guarantee. What the broken cup reveals about life. For many days after hearing the master's words, the young monk could not stop thinking about the cup. At first, the teaching felt strange. Why think about something breaking before it has broken? Wouldn't that make life gloomy? But gradually, he began to understand. The master was not teaching fear. He was teaching appreciation. Most people live as if life owes them permanence. They assume there will always be another conversation with a loved one, another holiday, another healthy year, another opportunity to say what needs to be said. Because of this assumption, they often overlook what is right in front of them. They postpone gratitude. They postpone kindness. They postpone living. Then one day, something changes. A relationship ends. A parent grows old. A friend moves away. A chapter of life closes forever. And suddenly, they realize how precious those ordinary moments truly were. The master understood something different. Because he knew the cup was already broken, he never took it for granted. Every sip of tea became meaningful. Every morning became a gift. Every moment carried a quiet sense of gratitude. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent, not as a warning, not as a punishment, but as a truth that can awaken us. Impermanence is what makes a sunset beautiful. It is what makes childhood precious. It is what makes a shared laugh with a friend valuable. If these things lasted forever, we would hardly notice them. The young monk eventually realized that the broken cup was not really about a cup at all. It was about life itself. Everything changes. Everything passes. Everything we love will one day take a different form. And when we stop pretending otherwise, we begin to live more fully. Not with fear, not with sadness, but with appreciation for the fragile, beautiful moments that are here right now. Living fully, because nothing lasts forever. As the months passed, the young monk began seeing the world differently. The lesson of the broken cup followed him everywhere. When he walked through the monastery gardens, he noticed flowers more carefully. Their beauty seemed greater because he knew they would soon fade. When he shared meals with fellow monks, he listened more attentively. He no longer assumed there would always be another chance to speak kindly. Even simple moments became more meaningful. The sound of rain on the roof, the warmth of morning sunlight, the quiet laughter of friends. Things he once overlooked now felt precious. This is one of the great paradoxes of life. Many people avoid thinking about impermanence because they believe it will make them sad. Yet the opposite is often true. When you remember that everything changes, gratitude naturally grows. You stop rushing through the present. You stop postponing happiness. You stop treating today as if it were guaranteed. The Buddha taught that wisdom is not found by pretending things will last forever. Wisdom comes from loving them fully while they are here. The broken cup reminds us to appreciate without clinging, to love without possessing, to enjoy without demanding permanence. Because every moment is already passing, and that is exactly what makes it so valuable. The cup is beautiful because it will one day break. Life is beautiful for the very same reason. The final lesson: rest like the open sky. As the years passed, many students came and went. Some searched for secret techniques. Some chased extraordinary experiences. Some wanted enlightenment to arrive quickly. But the wisest teachers often pointed towards something much simpler. Look at the sky. Clouds appear. Clouds disappear. Storms arrive. Storms pass. Yet the sky itself remains open and untouched. Your mind is often like the weather. Thoughts come and go. Emotions rise and fall. Memories appear and fade. Fear visits. Joy visits. Sadness visits. Peace visits. None of them stay forever. The problem begins when we mistake the weather for the sky. When anger appears, we believe we are anger. When sadness appears, we believe we are sadness. When worry appears, we believe we are worry. And then we spend enormous energy fighting, controlling, or escaping what is happening inside us. But the Buddha taught something different. You are not every passing thought. You are not every passing emotion. Thoughts are visitors. Emotions are visitors. Experiences are visitors. They arrive according to conditions and leave when conditions change. The sky never chases a cloud. The sky never begs a storm to stay. The sky never fears the arrival of rain. It allows everything to come and go naturally. This is the heart of all the stories you have heard. The monk who swept for 40 years. The centipede who forgot how to walk. The silent flower. The blind monk Sona. The grieving mother. The falling leaves. The flowing river. The empty boat. The broken cup. All of them point toward the same truth. Peace does not come from controlling life. Peace comes from relaxing our grip on it. The moment we stop fighting every thought, every change, every ending, and every uncertainty, something remarkable happens. The mind begins to rest. Not because the world becomes perfect, but because we finally stop demanding that it be. And in that quiet space, beneath all the noise and striving, we discover what was there all along. A stillness, as open as the sky itself. The mind was never the enemy. After hearing all these stories, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The mind was never the enemy. For most of our lives, we treat it as if it were. We fight our thoughts. We battle our emotions. We criticize ourselves for worrying too much, feeling too much, or thinking too much. But every story has revealed the same lesson. The problem is not that thoughts arise. The problem is that we cling to them. The centipede suffered when she started interfering with what already worked naturally. The grieving mother suffered most when she could not release her attachment to what had already changed. The student beneath the maple tree suffered because he believed every thought required his attention. The man in the boat suffered because he mistook his interpretation for reality. Again and again, the same pattern appeared. Life presents an experience. The mind grabs it, holds it, analyzes it, resists it, and suffering grows. Yet peace appeared whenever the grip loosened, when the monk simply swept, when Mahakashyapa simply saw the flower, when the river simply flowed, when the leaves simply fell. None of these stories teach us to destroy the mind. They teach us to stop being ruled by it. Thoughts can still come, memories can still appear, emotions can still move through us, but they no longer need to control our lives. Like clouds crossing an open sky, they can arrive and depart without taking our peace with them. Perhaps this is why so many people feel exhausted today. Not because life is impossible, but because they are carrying every thought, every regret, every fear, and every expectation as if it must be held forever. The truth is much gentler. You do not have to carry everything. You never did. And the moment you realize that, the mind begins to relax in a way that force could never achieve. Returning to what has always been here. Many people spend years searching for peace. They search through books, through teachers, through achievements, through relationships, through endless attempts to improve themselves. Yet the stories you've heard suggest something surprising. Peace is not something you create. It is something you uncover. Imagine a lake on a windy day. The surface is restless. Waves move in every direction. The water seems disturbed, but deep beneath the surface, the lake remains calm. Your mind is often the same. Thoughts are the waves. Emotions are the waves. Worries, plans, memories, and fears are all waves. When we focus only on the surface, life feels chaotic. We believe the turbulence is all there is. But beneath that movement lies a deeper stillness. A stillness that does not depend on circumstances. A stillness that remains present even when thoughts come and go. The Buddhist masters understood this. That is why they did not spend their lives trying to eliminate every thought. Instead, they learned how to return to the deeper part of themselves that existed before the struggle began. The monk returned to his broom. The student returned to the falling leaves. The traveler returned to the flowing river. Again and again, they returned to simple awareness. To this breath, this moment, this experience. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, just now. And perhaps that is the invitation being offered to you as well. You do not need to solve your entire life tonight. You do not need to answer every question. You do not need to fix every problem before allowing yourself to rest. For this moment, simply breathe. Let the body soften. Let thoughts come and go as they wish. Trust that life can continue without your constant control, because sometimes the deepest peace arrives not when we finally understand everything, but when we stop demanding that we do.